Using Story Grammar Marker with our ASD population, an academic, cognitive, and social tool by Liz Guarini, Communication Disorders, Cohort 11, California State University, Northridge. ASD is another word for Autism Spectrum Disorder. It includes Asperger's syndrome, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. It's medically, clinically diagnosed. Speech-language pathologists often are the first to identify based on symptoms. We refer to a clinical psychologist or a medical doctor. We counsel client, family, friends, classmates, academic staff, or employment personnel. Research implications for ASD interventions. What does our research have to say about this population? Well, the research implies or encourages a physical outlet that does not require combined motor coordination and competition. For example, the simple act of raising hands for answers and competing for that opportunity. Create reflexive narrative conversation opportunities. Provide strategies for facial features recall, memory scripts. Create social competence interventions. Address common pragmatic errors in addressing or answering contextually demanding questions. Create social interaction opportunities. Focus on others using scripts. Create opportunities to increase empathy through social stories and video modeling. And create interventions to increase concept of self and action. So, Story Grammar Marker is an evidence-based tool. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see an example of Braidy, which is the tool used in this entire process. So basically what you do is you use this as a manipulative, it's a tactile method of following the story or doing a sequence or problem solving. But if you were doing a story, the top portion at the top of the screen here, you see a pom-pom with two eyes. That's a character in the story. The stars, or the star basically, is a setting. It represents the setting. The shoe represents some kind of initiating event, a kickoff to some other sequence. The heart is a character's feeling about the initiating events. The hand is the character's planned response to the kickoff. That whole sequence right there is the beginning of a story. Then you have the 5 beads, and that represents the middle of a story. So the beads are attempts to achieve the above beginning story plan. And then you have an end of a story. The bow, the direct consequence as it relates to the planned attempts, and hearts, the character's feelings about the direct consequence. So here's Braidy. As you can see, the top version right here, that's the pom-pom. It represents the character of the story. The star represents the setting. The shoe represents a kickoff event, something that causes you to react. And then you have this whole area they call the triangle. So the critical thinking triangle is basically a combination of the kickoff event, the feelings, which is a heart, and then the hand, which is basically a plan of action, right? Then you have your 5 beads, and each one of these 5 beads represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions to the story or the problem-solving experience, the bow ties everything together, and then at the very end there's hearts to show the feelings of the overall experience. Now this one right here that I'm holding is the actual teacher version, which if you do have children who have more fine motor skill challenges, this one would be a better choice than, say, the student version. Here's the student version, same thing. The beads are much smaller, though, for example, and so that's a little bit harder to manipulate. The actual preschool version, which I don't own, is a lot more expensive. It's more useful for fine motor skills, and these are actually less expensive than, say, the preschool version. I think these run about $8, and I think the preschool version is about $50. The teacher version right here, I think, is about $25. And in any case, they're all the exact same setup, just a little bit smaller. Braidy versions. There are 3 main kinds of Braidy versions provided by the company Mindspring. The first one is a smaller teacher size Braidy, which is what you see on the right-hand screen. Then you have a larger, say, preschool version on the left-hand screen with the author. And then there is one more that is about half the size of the one you see on the right side, smaller beads, smaller pom-pom, and that's the student version. Now, when you use story grammar marker, one of the goals is helping a student retell a story, stay focused on the story, but also to possibly write a version of that story. And here on this page you see a story map, the characters and the setting at the top where the students can write in that information. The problem and goal area, that's basically where you saw the hand and the kickoff event and the star. The major events are the different beads, and then the story outcome is the ties and the hearts at the very end. Now, when you have a student, say you're seeing for the first time, you're assessing that student to see what kind of level of narrative they have, or whether you're trying to problem solve what kind of social skill you're trying to teach. You basically have these stages to look at. You have stage 1, 2, 3. You have stage 4, 5, 6, and 7. So basically each of these stages gradually increase in level of complexity. So if you look at stage 1, it's called a descriptive sequence. You have the character, anything that you see highlighted or blackened in terms of the story marker. Those are the items that the student or the client or the patient might give you. So in stage 1, maybe that person is only able to give you the character and a description of the setting. So that might be their stage 1, that's where they are, and maybe one goal you have is to have them go to stage 2 for, say, a short-term goal, and then a long-term goal is to get to stage 3. If you notice stage 2, that's called an action sequence. In that sequence, you have the pom-poms, you have the character, you have the star, so you have the setting, you have the actions, but there's nothing else. So the student might give you that information. You might want a little bit more, like what you see in stage 3, the reactive sequence, which includes a kickoff event. So now all of a sudden the shoe is highlighted. Like everything else, the pom-pom, so you have the character, they might give you the character, they might give you the setting, and so now they're giving you a kickoff event, and then the beads, the following beads, which are the actions or reactions or sequences, whatever your needs are. Stage 4, you have an abbreviated episode. So basically, it's getting a little bit more involved at the beginning of the story. So that student might tell you the character, the setting, something that set off a sequence of events, a cause and effect. So for example, a kickoff might trigger some kind of feeling, which is the heart. And then the hand might be some kind of plan that the character has. And then that bow at the very end of that sequence you see there is something that ties it all together. Stage 5, a little bit more detail. So now you have the planned attempts. So not only do you have the character, setting, kickoff, the feelings, the plan, but now you have specific actions in the middle filled out with the tie at the end, and then additional feelings as a direct consequence of what went on. Stage 6, you have the everything filled in with an extra kickoff in the middle of the sequence, and then stage 7, which is an interactive episode, is more complex. You may have more than one episode in the story, or more than one way of sequencing some kind of problem-solving strategy. So, in any case, those are items that are provided for you in the Mind-Wing Concepts manual, and it's also a way for, say, a speech-language pathologist to help a patient or a client get from one stage to another via, say, short-term goals and long-term goals. Very useful information. And then if you're interested in this product, their website, which is mindwingconcepts.com, contains a full page of items that they sell. Braidy, for example, I mentioned that there's different versions of Braidy, from large to very small, different prices. And then there's kits in terms of worksheets you can give to students or clients, and actual examples of stories and how you would go through the sequence with them. So that's that. Okay. On this section, I wanted to share an example of how you could do story, grammar marker, and problem solve. There's a link here that I want to show you. It's 5 minutes and 47 seconds. It's actually done by the author of this tool, and she gives the example of a 3rd grade boy named Michael, whose teacher gives a 3-step command in class. It tells the students to put away art supplies, return the seats, and line up for a read aloud in the auditorium. Well, Michael has a hard time following this 3-step commands. He has a meltdown, and then later a speech-language pathologist came up with the idea of using the story grammar marker to help him solve this problem. So basically, using Braidy to have Michael internalize the experience. So Michael now is the character. The setting is the classroom. The kickoff is a teacher's command. The heart represents the feelings. In this case, he has a tantrum, a meltdown. The hand is a plan to attend the read aloud. So now Michael has to come up with a plan with the help of the speech-language pathologist. The beads represent the actions needed for this event. The tie ties everything together, and the hearts show how the actions make him feel and how he might need help or how he solved this problem. So this is an example of how you can use this tool not only for an academic tool, say with someone who is typically developing or someone who is on the autism spectrum. So it shows another level of flexibility in using this tool. So you'll go ahead and watch that video. Now, aside from discussing the information, the story grammar marker provides many different kinds of forms so that you can use this as a writing experience with your students to internalize the information. So it's another way of expressive communication and staying focused in this expressive communication, but in this modality, in this form, we're using writing versus narrating aloud. Now, here's an example that I came up with in terms of someone with a moderate level of ASD. In this case, I have Tyler, who has a comorbid diagnosis of Down syndrome and ASD. He's 16. He's a sophomore in a high school special education classroom. He's verbal, but he does not read or write. And so some of his pragmatic challenges includes interruptions, perseveration with twirling of hair strands in his fingers, looking away, looking around the room, rocking in the chair, putting hands over his mouth and talking and laughing. And so here's one way you can use Braidy with, say, someone like Tyler, using, say, only 3 beads. The example here is going back to, just to give you a simple story, 3 Little Pigs. There's many other stories, but this is just to kind of give you an example of how to use the story marker. What you would think of in working with, say, someone of Tyler's skills, his strengths, and his deficits, you basically would look around the story, some peripheral items. In his case, he would need the story in a book format, a visual format as well. The more formats available, the better. A traditional format, for example, a alternative, more recent format, a tactile format. Now, I also listed a scholastic organizer, so you might have something like a Venn diagram board or a story quilt where you write the information in. And even though he has a hard time reading and writing, it doesn't mean that we don't do things like that with him. We basically still provide those opportunities because he does start grasping information. And so it's just another level of input for him. He does really well with a timer, letting him know that this activity will take oh so long, let's say 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If he starts to get a little bit anxious, so having a weighted pillow close by or having items to hold down onto helps him. And then also having some comfortable sitting arrangement, like on a beanbag chair or on a ball, some kind of alternative format in case the chair is not as comfortable for him. Things I didn't write up here also, lighting might be a challenge, and then distractions in the room. So those are some background, or what I call peripheral items to think about before you even attempt the story. Now, once you tell the story, like say in Tyler's case, then here's an example of using Braidy or story grammar marker, looking at the story from the wolf's perspective. So here we have the character as a wolf. We have the setting as a countryside. The kickoff event is basically the wolf sees the pigs. The heart or the feeling is the wolf feeling hungry. So he feels hungry and has this plan to blow down a house. He blows down, he's got 3 options. He's going to blow down hopefully 1 house and then have his goal item. Well, as you know the story, action with the beads. Action 1, he blows down a straw house. Doesn't happen. Action 2, he blows down a wood house. Still no action. He doesn't get his goal. Action 3, he blows down a brick house. Again, no success there. So then he's forced into a final action, and that's climbing a chimney. So those are all examples of actions that the wolf takes on. We're looking at it from his perspective. The tie, in this case, is the pig basically outsmarted the wolf. In the hearts, the wolf is upset each time he leaves to find a different solution. So that's just one example of using story grammar marker with, say, a story like The Three Little Pigs, but also keeping in mind that you need to have peripheral items ahead of time before you get to this stage, and then having the story grammar marker or Braidy in their hands really helps them stay focused and helps them go through the story. And then if there's more than one person, say Tyler and say a classmate, a female in this class, then maybe it gives them a better sense of turn taking in a visual and a tactile format. So this example, as a peripheral example, it comes from Skool, and basically it's more of an alternative approach. So we have here another story, The Little Red Riding Hood. I provided the link here. It can be followed or used as a follow-up or an alternative reading. And in this instance, the Skool librarian uses the following techniques that are very helpful for someone on the spectrum. And these you'll see in the story. So you have a transition language at the beginning. So she basically gives some kind of indication that there's a change from one activity to another. She uses a lot of visuals. In this case, it's computer graphics that pop up in the background. And so that helps maintain that attention. It gives a visual to make the information, the context, concrete for them. She uses lots of gestures. She puts her hands on her hips. She raises her shoulders. She leans forward. She changes her facial expressions. All these different things not only help them with cues, but these are things that can be discussed after the story. She connects to the age group by using samples she thinks that might be suitable for this age group. And again, here in this example, it might be an opportunity to say why those options are not the best options. There's closed captions, so another way of having the story have another modality, another input. Okay, again, your peripherals, you need cues and prompts to use with population, so the transitions before the activity, multimodalities, and redirection, turn taking, some cues and prompts to help with redirection and turn taking before that all takes place. Okay, so now we have using story grammar marker with Little Red Riding Hood. After you've done the story from Skool, some things you can talk about. Your character. You have Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf, the grandmother. You can take on any one of those characters. The setting is a scary forest. The kickoff is Grandma being sick. So that's basically that event that starts everything. That has Little Red Riding Hood going into the forest. That's what allows a wolf to see this Little Red Riding Hood. And then all the events that happen afterwards. You can talk about the wolf actions. That he snatched the hood, he snatched the basket, he ate the grandmother, he disguised himself, he got sick. Now, going back to ate the grandmother, now one thing to keep in mind with the ASD population is sometimes things are very literal. So this would be a great opportunity to talk about how this is not a literal, it might have been literal in the story, it's not something that happens, like, say, in real life. In a typical real life, and it's a good example of bringing out a dialogue about that and bringing about awareness. Alternative questions to stay on topic. You might have emotions and feelings discussed. So you might talk about scared, like in the forest, or sick, grandmother, or at one point the wolf calls the girl sassy. What does that mean? Other feelings we have. Feelings that led to other actions, yelled, kicked, running away, there's degrees of running, but how some of these are effective or ineffective, and if there were times that we've ever felt that way and tried one of those options and it didn't work, and what other options are better. Foods, in the example, she talks about liver, onions, and peas. Okay, that's a semantic list of foods, and then she then comes up with a second list of foods that might be more popular with, say, our kid generation today, and might not also be nutritious, but it's an opportunity to talk about these foods, right? Whether you're a proponent or not a proponent of these food items. For example, she talks about the fruit roll-ups, the pizza, the ice cream, and the 4 Twinkies. And then there's the people called. So we have the policeman, the fireman, the animal control, the bounty hunter, right? More opportunities for increasing vocabulary, for increasing memory skills, for staying on topic. All these are just different ways you can use a story grammar marker, right? Little Red Riding Hood actions. You know, she packed a basket, she walked through the woods, she talked to a wolf, she visited the circus. Again, another way of getting some verbs, some past tense verbs in this case. Okay, so summary. The story grammar marker is an application of needs discussed in the literature, in that it encourages a physical outlet that does not require combined motor coordination and competition, like the example we brought back earlier of raising hands for answers. So instead of having to compete for the answer, you might have a story marker in each person's hand, and each person takes a turn. So each person uses a bead and takes a turn. Story grammar marker creates reflexive narrative conversation opportunities. Story grammar marker provides a way of recalling facial features of an individual or memorizing scripts. It increases opportunities for social competence, addresses common pragmatic errors made in answering contextually demanding questions, creates opportunities for social interaction focusing on others and use of scripts, creates opportunities for increasing empathy through social stories and video modeling, and it provides a tactile and sensory method in helping increase concept of self. So the combined use of story grammar marker or the Braidy with story grammar marker allows for all those points addressed in the ASD literature to be addressed and to be placed in an intervention that you can use in your clinical setting. Aside from that, some other general uses, it allows you to talk about character, setting, plot, direct consequences. It allows you to talk about temporal sequences, cause and effect relationships, problem solving, as you saw with the creator of Story Grammar Marker, and then some plans of actions for incorporating feelings, which is so very important for our ASD population. Sometimes we don't have that opportunity to discuss feelings and dissect it with more detail. And so at the end of this presentation in the PDF format, you'll see all the research references pertaining to these bullet points that I brought to your attention in this presentation. So feel free to look at those research article summaries, and I wish you success in using Story Grammar Marker with your ASD population. Thanks again.